I never thought I'd end up in the hospital longer than a couple of days. It all started with a stupid accident at work. I fell off a ladder, broke my arm, and cracked a few ribs. They admitted me to the ward, and those first nights were hell. The pain, the injections, the endless beeping machines, and then she walked in. Maria, a nurse in her late 20s, with the kind of smile that makes you forget where you are. She wasn't like the others. She didn't rush, didn't brush me off when I asked dumb questions. She'd actually sit down, explain things, sometimes even laugh with me. I caught myself waiting for her shifts, counting down the hours until she'd come back into my room, but then I noticed the ring on her finger, a wedding band. It was like a bucket of cold water, but it only made me wonder more. Why was she so kind to me? Why did her eyes linger a little too long? One night, when the ward was quiet and I was the only one in the room, she brought me tea. She sat on the edge of the bed and said softly, "You know, you're easier to take care of than most. You don't complain, even when you're clearly in pain." I joked back, "That's because you're the one helping me." For the first time, I saw her blush, and she didn't look away. That was the beginning. The second week in the hospital felt different. My pain wasn't gone, but I was healing enough to notice other things, like how Maria always seemed to linger a little longer by my bed than by anyone else's. She'd ask me about my work, about my family, about what I liked to do outside the hospital. I found myself telling her things I hadn't said to anyone in years. One evening, she checked my and then, instead of leaving, she sat down in the chair beside me. "Do you miss home?" she asked. "Of course," I said, "but right now, I don't mind being here as much." Her lips curved in the faintest smile. She didn't have to ask why. I wanted to stop myself, to remind myself she was married. But the way she looked at me, not like a patient, not like a burden, it made the walls of the hospital room fade away, finally. I asked the question I'd been holding back. "Does your husband mind the long shifts?" For a split second, something in her expression changed. A flicker of sadness, quickly hidden behind her professional calm. "He doesn't really notice," she said quietly. "He has his own life." She stood up quickly, almost as if she'd revealed too much. I should get back to my rounds, but that one sentence stayed with me all night. Her husband had his own life. And for the first time, I wondered if that wedding band on her finger wasn't a promise, but a cage. The next few days, Maria seemed more guarded. She still came to check on me, but the conversations were shorter, safer. I could feel her pulling back, and yet there were moments when her eyes betrayed her. One afternoon, while adjusting the blanket over me, she sighed, a sound so heavy it didn't belong in a hospital room. "Long day?" I asked carefully. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Long marriage." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her cheeks flushed as if she'd broken some unspoken rule, and she turned away to rearrange my chart. I wanted to respect her silence, but something inside me pushed. "You don't have to pretend with me." Her hands froze on the clipboard. Slowly, she turned back. Her eyes were glassy, vulnerable. "He doesn't look at me anymore," she whispered. "I come home, and it's like I'm invisible. Maybe I've been invisible for years." The confession hung between us. I wasn't supposed to be the one hearing it, but I was. I reached out instinctively, my fingers brushing hers for just a second before she pulled away. But in that tiny touch, something sparked, something that had nothing to do with medicine or duty. Maria shook her head. "This is wrong," she murmured, almost to herself. "You're my patient." But even as she said it, she didn't leave right away. She lingered by the bed, her hand trembling slightly against the railing. And in that silence, we both knew a line had been crossed. The days blurred into each other, marked by the rhythm of hospital life, the beeping monitors, the shuffle of footsteps in the hallway, the smell of antiseptic that never seemed to fade. But for me, the only thing that really mattered was the clock, specifically the hours when Maria was scheduled to check in. She had been avoiding lingering in my room. I could feel it. She'd walk in with that professional smile, ask the routine questions, note things down on her clipboard, and leave as quickly as possible. But the way her eyes flickered to mine when she thought I wasn't looking betrayed her. She wasn't indifferent. She was fighting something, and so was I one evening. The hospital was quieter than usual. Visiting hours had ended, the corridors dimly lit, the world outside fading into night. Maria came in, her hair slightly undone from a long shift. There was a tired grace about her, the kind that only comes from someone who has been carrying too much for too long. "Can't sleep again?" she asked softly when she saw me staring at the ceiling. I shook my head. To many thoughts, she gave a faint smile, pulling the chair closer to my bed. "That makes two of us." I turned to look at her fully. "You don't look like someone who gets much rest at all." Her eyes flickered, almost defensive. "It's part of the job." "No," I said quietly. "It's more than that." For a moment, I thought she'd shut down again, retreat into that professional armor she wore so well. But instead, she sighed and leaned back in the chair, staring at the floor as if the words she carried were too heavy to hold any longer. "My husband," she began, her voice trembling. "We don't talk anymore." "Not really. We coexist in the same house, but it's like living with a stranger. And when he does look at me, it's only to criticize." "It's been years since I felt." She stopped abruptly, pressing her lips together. "Felt what?" I asked gently. Her eyes rose to meet mine, glistening in the dim hospital light. "Felt seen." The silence that followed was deafening. My chest ached, not from the injury that had landed me here, but from the weight of her confession. "Maria," I said, her name almost a whisper. "You deserve more than that. You deserve someone who looks at you like you're the whole damn world." Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed softly, a broken laugh filled with disbelief. "You say that so easily." "Because it's true," I replied, my voice firm despite the fragility of the moment. "I see you." The words hung between us, dangerous and undeniable. Her hand was resting on the arm of the chair, and before I could think twice, I reached out. My fingers brushed against hers, tentative, searching. She didn't pull away this time. Instead, her hand turned, her palm meeting mine. Her skin was warm, trembling ever so slightly, but the contact sent a current through me stronger than any medicine. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. "This is wrong," she whispered, echoing the words she'd said before. But her grip tightened around my hand, contradicting her own protest. I shifted slightly, ignoring the dull pain in my ribs. "Then tell me to let go." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted between our hands and my face, searching, torn. She didn't tell me to let go. The room seemed to shrink around us, the air heavier, charged. She leaned forward, slightly, as though pulled by something neither of us could fight. I could feel the warmth of her breath, the subtle scent of her shampoo, the trembling restraint in every fiber of her being. Our faces were inches apart now. Her voice was barely audible. "If I cross this line, I cut her off." My voice low, steady. "Then neither of us will ever be the same." And then, for the briefest, most dangerous second, she let herself go. Her lips brushed mine, feather-light, fleeting, but enough to ignite everything we had both been burying. It wasn't a kiss, not really. More like the ghost of one, a promise, a warning. She pulled back instantly, her chest rising and falling rapidly, eyes wide with panic. "I can't," she breathed, standing abruptly. "I can't do this." Maria, but she was already moving toward the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the handle. Before leaving, she turned, her expression a storm of fear and longing. "This never happened," she said firmly, though her voice cracked at the edges. And then she was gone. I lay back against the pillow, my heart pounding louder than the monitors. Around me, the taste of her lingered, faint but unforgettable, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. There was no going back.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.
The next morning, everything felt different. Maria came into the room with her usual clipboard, her professional smile, her crisp uniform, but she couldn't look me in the eyes. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable to anyone else, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her hands clutched the pen tighter than usual, the way her breathing quickened when she stood too close. She tried to keep it all clinical. She checked my vitals, scribbled down notes, asked the same questions she always did. But she wouldn't meet my gaze. I finally broke the silence. Are we going to pretend last night didn't happen? Her hand froze mid-note. Slowly, she set the clipboard down, her shoulders tense. It didn't happen, she said firmly. I tilted my head. Maria, she shook her head, cutting me off. No, I can't. I have a family, a son, a husband who... She stopped, her voice faltering, as if even mentioning him left a sour taste in her mouth. A husband who doesn't see you, I said gently. Her eyes snapped to mine then, sharp and defensive. But there was no denying the truth in my words. For a few seconds, she just stared at me, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. And then she grabbed the clipboard again, like it was her shield. This conversation is over, she said, and left before I could reply. But conversations like that don't just end. For days, we danced around it. She came in, did her work, and tried to keep her distance, but there were cracks in her armor. Sometimes she lingered a second too long when handing me water. Sometimes her eyes softened, betraying the pull she was trying so hard to deny. And every time our hands brushed, whether by accident or not, I saw the conflict flash across her face. One evening, when the ward was especially quiet, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Maria, I said, my voice low, steady. She turned, hesitant. Why are you so afraid of being seen? Her lips parted, and for a moment I thought she'd shut me down again. But instead, she sat down slowly as if her body moved before her. Mind could stop it, because she whispered, if someone really sees me, I might not be able to go back to pretending. And my whole life is built on pretending. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful. I wanted to reach out to tell her she didn't have to pretend anymore, not with me. But before I could, the sound of her phone buzzing shattered the moment. She glanced at the screen, and her face paled. She excused herself quickly, almost running. Out of the room. Later that night, I found out why her husband had shown up at the hospital. I didn't see him, but I heard the nurses talking. He had come looking for her, apparently upset that she'd been working late so often. When she came back to check on me hours later, she looked rattled. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Maria, I said softly, what happened? She forced a smile, but it was brittle, broken. Nothing I can't handle. I sat up slightly despite the pain. You don't have to handle it alone. She shook her head fiercely. You don't understand, if he even suspects. If he thinks I've found something outside of him. She stopped, pressing her hand to her forehead. He'd destroy me. Her words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about a failing marriage. This was about control. About fear. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull. Away, she sank into the chair beside me, her fingers lacing with mine, trembling but holding on like I was the only steady thing in her storm. I don't know how much longer I can keep living like this, she whispered. I tightened my grip, my voice firm. Then don't. You deserve better. You deserve love, not fear. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. But what if it's too late for me? I leaned closer, my words low and certain. It's never too late, Maria, not as long as you're breathing. For the first time, she didn't pull away. She let the silence wrap around us, heavy but intimate. Her hand stayed in mine until the shift change forced her to leave. And as I lay back in bed, I realized something undeniable. Her husband was starting to notice. And that made everything far more dangerous. It started small. A phone call here, a text there. Little things that might have seemed normal to anyone else, but to Maria, they were chains tightening around her wrists. Her husband had always been controlling, but lately it had become suffocating. Every hour, without fail, her phone buzzed with messages. Where are you? Who are you with? Why aren't you answering? She tried to laugh it off when she told me, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her smile cracked like fragile glass. He doesn't trust me, she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper, and the worst part is, I think he has reason not to. She didn't need to say why. We both knew. Then came the first time he showed up. It was late, almost midnight, and most of the ward was quiet except for the occasional beep of monitors. Maria was sitting with me, her hand resting near mine on the bed rail, our conversation soft and heavy with unsaid words. The door suddenly swung open. A tall man stood there, his face twisted with anger, his eyes searching, and landing on Maria. There you are, he snapped. She shot up from her chair like she'd been burned. You can't be here. I can go wherever my wife is. He cut her off, his gaze darting to me with suspicion. I met his stare calmly, even though my heart was pounding. He sized me up, his jaw tightening. To him, I was just a patient, weak, immobile, harmless. But I could tell he didn't like the way Maria had been sitting so close. I was working, Maria said quickly, smoothing her uniform as if that could erase the intimacy of the scene he'd just walked in on. Working. He scoffed. At midnight, sitting around talking. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her body rigid. You need to leave. For a moment, I thought he might explode. But then he smirked, the kind of smirk that carried a warning. We'll talk about this at home. And just like that, he turned and left, leaving behind a silence that felt like a storm about to break. Maria didn't speak for a long time. She just stood there, staring at the floor, trembling. Finally, she said, "You don't understand what he's capable of." I reached out, my hand brushing hers. "Then tell me." "Let me understand," but she pulled away, shaking her head. "If I let you in, I put you in danger too." The days that followed were unbearable. Her husband began showing up more often, sometimes under the guise of bringing her food, sometimes just lurking in the parking lot. Other nurses whispered about it, some giving Maria sympathetic looks, others judgmental ones. But despite his watchful eye, she kept coming back to my room. Every moment we had together was stolen, dangerous, but necessary. One night, she finally let the dam break. "I can't keep doing this," she confessed, her voice raw. "He checks my phone. He goes through my purse. He times how long I spend in each room. If he ever finds out about you." Her eyes filled with tears, and I did the only thing I could. I reached out, taking her hand in mine, squeezing it firmly. "Maria," I said softly but with conviction, "he already knows something's different. You can't hide forever, and you shouldn't have to." She shook her head, her tears slipping down her cheeks. "It's not that simple. If I leave him, he'll take my son. He'll ruin me." My chest tightened. The thought of her trapped, suffocating in that toxic cage, was unbearable. "You're stronger than you think," I whispered. Her hand trembled in mine, but she didn't let go. For the first time, she let her head fall onto my shoulder, her body curling toward me like she'd been holding herself together for too long, and finally let herself break. And I knew, in that fragile, dangerous moment, that our story was no longer just about longing. It was about survival. The nights grew heavier and the days stretched longer, but the pull between us only deepened. Maria had perfected the art of slipping into my room when the ward was quiet, a nurse's shift change, a lull between rounds, a few stolen minutes while another patient slept. Every time she stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her, it felt like the air shifted, charged with a current neither of us could deny anymore. She would sit close, sometimes too close, her knees brushing against mine under the blanket. Her voice, once professional, had turned softer when she spoke to me, a tone that wasn't reserved for anyone else. One night, she brought me coffee. "It's against every rule," she admitted, smiling shyly as she set the cup on my tray. "But I thought you could use something better than hospital tea." Our fingers brushed when I took it from her. Neither of us moved away. "Maria," I started, but the words caught in my throat. She shook her head, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "Don't. If you say it out loud, it becomes real. And if it's real, it's dangerous." But the truth was already there between us, unspoken but undeniable. Her husband, meanwhile, was circling like a hawk. He called more often, sometimes 10, 15 times during her shifts. If she didn't answer right away, he stormed into the hospital demanding to know where she was. Other nurses began to notice he was here again. One of them whispered outside my room, "It's not healthy the way he follows her." I caught snippets of gossip. Some pitied her, others judged. But all of them knew something was unraveling, and so did he. Maria told me one evening, her hands wringing together, her eyes darting to the door as though he might appear at any second. He asked me outright if I'm seeing someone. She whispered, "He thinks there's someone else." I denied it, of course, but he didn't believe me. He said he'll find out the truth. Her voice broke on the last word. I wanted to tell her to run, to leave him before he destroyed her. But the fear in her eyes wasn't just for herself. It was for her child. "If I make one wrong move, he'll take my son," she confessed, her body trembling. "He'll make sure I have nothing." My chest ached with helplessness. I reached for her hand, gripping it tight. "You're not alone in this. You don't have to carry it all by yourself." For a long moment, she just stared at me, tears gathering at the edges of her lashes. Then, as if something in her finally broke free, she leaned in and kissed me. It was desperate, trembling, stolen, the kind of kiss born from fear and longing all at once. And when she pulled away, her breath shaky, her eyes wide, she whispered, "This can't happen again." But we both knew it would, because for the first time in years, Maria felt alive. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had something worth fighting for. The change was subtle at first. A few suspicious looks, a handful of questions Maria brushed off with practiced ease. But soon her husband's jealousy became something sharper, darker, almost suffocating. He started showing up at the hospital more frequently. At first, it was under the guise of bringing her lunch or checking on her during long shifts. But everyone knew better. His eyes roamed every hallway. His presence made the other nurses tense. He lingered near the nurses' station longer than any visitor should, his smile thin, his voice polite, but edged with something dangerous. "He's watching you." I told her one night after she slipped into my room. She had dark circles under her eyes, her movements jittery, like she'd been holding her breath all day. "I know," she whispered. "He went through my phone yesterday. He asked why my texts to the other nurses were deleted. They weren't, but he didn't believe me." Her hands trembled as she adjusted the sheets on my bed, a nervous habit she couldn't shake. "He even asked about you, said I spend too much time in this room. I told him it's my job, that you need extra care." But she trailed off, shaking her head. "But he doesn't believe you," I finished. She looked at me then, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. "He said he'll catch me, that he always catches me when I lie." The walls felt like they were closing in. Every stolen glance, every fleeting touch carried the risk of exposure. I found myself waiting for the door to burst open whenever she leaned close, whenever her hand lingered on mine, and yet neither of us stopped. One night, she stayed longer than usual, her head resting against my shoulder as I held her hand under the blanket. "I can't keep living like this," she whispered. "Every day feels like a trap. I walk on eggshells at home, and now even here, I feel him breathing down my neck." "Leave him," I said, too quickly, too desperately. She sat up, her face twisting with pain. "It's not that simple. If I leave, he'll fight me for custody. He'll use my son against me. He'll say I'm unstable, unfaithful. And in his world, people believe him." Her words cut deeper than any wound, because she wasn't just afraid of losing everything. She was convinced she already had. The breaking point came 3 days later. Her husband barged into the ward, demanding to see her. His voice carried down the hall, sharp and accusing. "Where is she? Don't lie to me." I could hear him from my bed, his footsteps heavy as he stormed past. Nurses tried to calm him, but his fury filled every corner of the hospital. When Maria finally appeared in my doorway, her face was pale, her lips trembling. "He's asked about cameras," she whispered. "He wants to see the security footage. He thinks he'll find me sneaking into your room." The thought made my blood run cold. What if he does? I asked. She swallowed hard. "Then he'll ruin me. He'll take my child. And he'll destroy you too." That night, she didn't kiss me. She didn't even sit beside me. She stood by the window, staring out into the darkness, her body rigid with fear, but I knew something had shifted, because for the first time since we met, Maria wasn't just afraid of being caught. She was afraid of what he might do once he did. The next morning, the ward was unusually tense. Maria slipped into my room with a heaviness I hadn't seen before. Her hands shook as she closed the door, and her eyes darted toward the hallway as if expecting him to appear at any moment. "I think he found something," she whispered, her voice trembling. I frowned. "Found what?" She hesitated, biting her lower lip. "A nurse saw him looking through the security footage yesterday. And there's a photo he took. Just you, me, together. He's going to confront me tonight." My stomach twisted. The risk had escalated beyond anything we'd imagined. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "Tonight. Go somewhere he can't find you." She shook her head. "I can't. If I disappear, he'll know. He'll know I'm hiding. And then it'll get worse." The hours crawled by. Every nurse walking past looked like a potential informant. Every footstep outside the door made our hearts race. Finally, the inevitable happened. The door burst open. His shadow filled the room. His eyes were cold, sharp. "Maria!" He barked. "Step aside!" Now, Maria's face drained of color. Her hands clutched mine, seeking comfort. I stood slowly, facing him as he approached. "There's nothing here that shouldn't be," I said evenly, trying to keep my voice calm. Though my pulse was racing, he ignored me, fixing his gaze on Maria. "Explain this," he demanded, holding up his phone. A photo glared back at her. Us, sitting close, her hand on mine. Her face crumpled. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no words. "You lied to me," he said, each word sharp as a knife. "You've been sneaking around, thinking I wouldn't notice. And now you've involved him." Maria's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She finally whispered, "I never wanted to hurt anyone. Save it." He cut her off. "I trusted you." My own pulse raced, but I stayed still, letting her handle the confrontation. It was her life, her choices, her danger. He turned to me then, a mixture of suspicion and fury. "And you, what do you think you're doing here?" I met his stare calmly. "I care about her. That's it. Nothing more." He sneered, unconvinced, then stormed out, promising consequences. The ward felt suffocatingly silent afterward. Maria sank onto the chair beside me, trembling. Her head fell into her hands. "It's over," she whispered. I reached for her hand. "No, it's not. Not yet. We still have choices." She looked up, fear and longing mixed in her gaze. "But the risk? It's too much now. What if he comes back? What if he ruins everything?" I held her close, whispering, "Then we face it. Together, whatever comes." For the first time, we knew the stakes weren't just emotional. They were real. The game had changed, and the clock was ticking. The tension had reached a breaking point. Maria arrived at the ward, her uniform slightly wrinkled from tossing and turning all night. She kept glancing over her shoulder, every shadow sending shivers down her spine. "He's been calling the hospital," she whispered as she entered my room, closing the door behind her. "He asked about my shift, about where I've been. I think he even spoke to the nurse's supervisor." My jaw tightened. He's crossing a line. "If he gets any closer, it's going to get dangerous." Maria nodded, biting her lip. "I know, and the problem is, I can't avoid him completely. He knows my routine too well. If I miss a shift, he'll ask questions. If I take a break, he'll notice. He's everywhere." Her hands trembled as she smoothed the blanket over my legs. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." I reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "Then we need a plan. We can't let him ruin this." "Whatever we have." She looked up, her eyes wide with fear and hope. "You really think there's a way out?" "I do," I said, "but we have to be smart, invisible, careful. One wrong move, and it could be the end." It started the very next day. He appeared near the ward entrance, lurking around the reception desk like a predator waiting for prey. Maria froze when she saw him, instinctively hiding behind a patient's curtain. I stayed calm, trying not to draw attention. When he didn't notice me, I whispered, "Go now." She hesitated, then nodded and slipped out of sight. My heart pounded. I couldn't let him see me leaving. That would only make him suspicious. Over the next few hours, the tension escalated. He asked every nurse about her whereabouts, lingered longer than usual, and even attempted to check the patient logs for any unusual visits. One of the nurses, terrified, came to warn us, whispering, "He's getting desperate. Be careful." We realized we were being watched at all times, every movement recorded in his mind, every word scrutinized. By evening, Maria made a decision. "We can't keep hiding," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "We need to meet somewhere outside. Somewhere he can't follow." I nodded. "I know a place. It's safe. But we have to move quickly." We planned the escape with precision, choosing a time when the hospital would be least crowded, when he'd likely be distracted. Each step felt like walking on a knife's edge. As we slipped out together, I felt her hand tighten around mine, her grip a mixture of fear and determination. "Promise me we'll make it through this," she whispered. I looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of everything, the danger, the secrecy, the undeniable connection between us. "I promise," I said. And as we disappeared into the night, the shadow of her husband lingered behind, closer than ever, unaware that we were already plotting the next move, one that could either free us forever or destroy everything. The night was silent, but danger lurked everywhere. Maria and I had taken a hidden route to meet in a small rented apartment outside the city. Her husband had been calling relentlessly, sending messages that were increasingly aggressive and threatening. I paced the room, thinking, calculating. He knows something's wrong. He's getting closer. Maria hugged herself in the corner, her eyes wide with fear. What if he finds us? What if this is the end? "We'll face it together," I said, gripping her hand. "No matter what happens, we stick together." Hours passed like minutes. Suddenly, the door rattled violently. Her heart jumped, and she clutched my arm. "It's him," she whispered. The doorknob twisted, and he shoved the door open, fury burning in his eyes. "Step aside, Maria," he shouted. I stepped in front of her, my body tense, ready. "He won't touch her," I said firmly. He sneered. And who are you? The one she's been hiding with. The confrontation escalated quickly. Words turned to threats. Threats turned to a struggle. In the chaos, Maria's tears fell silently, and the world seemed to shrink to just the three of us. By the end, we were left breathless, shaken, but determined. The threat wasn't gone, but we had survived the first attack. The morning light felt like a new beginning, but danger still lingered in every shadow. We had decided we could no longer hide. It was now or never. Maria had arranged for legal protection, friends willing to back her up, and I had promised to stay at her side no matter what. When her husband arrived at her apartment that evening, the tension was unbearable. He barged in, looking for answers, control, revenge. Maria, open up, he shouted, pounding on the door. I stepped forward. He won't intimidate you anymore, I said. The confrontation was intense. He tried to grab her to force compliance, but the combination of legal backup and our refusal made him hesitate. The struggle was psychological, tense, raw. Every word, every gesture carried weight. Finally, realizing he had no power here, he stormed out, slamming the door, vowing revenge. We were left shaking, but free. The air around us seemed to release. A decade of tension in a single breath. Maria collapsed into my arms, crying, laughing, overwhelmed. It's over, she whispered. I held her tightly. No, we made it through, together. Though the danger wasn't completely gone, the battle had been won. We had chosen each other, defied fear, and claimed a moment of freedom that felt like the start of something real. And as the sun rose over the city, for the first time in years, we could breathe together, unbroken, ready to face whatever came next, side by side.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.